This is a setup. This is a lie. Shut down the lights right now. Don't you dare touch me, Julian. You used my family's name to launder your stolen millions. You did this to me. You planned this entire night. The most dangerous enemy is the one you believe you have completely broken. My multimillionaire husband thought I was just a quiet, invisible art restorer. Until I painted the master blueprint of his absolute destruction. My name is Iris, and this is my story of ultimate betrayal and mathematical revenge. Before we unlock the first layer of how I brought down a billionaire's empire, take a second to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Turn on the bell icon right now so you never miss a single twist. Trust me, you will want to hear every single detail of how this trap was built. The true master of a multi-million-dollar painting is never the arrogant billionaire who buys it to show off his wealth. It is the silent artist who knows exactly what monstrous secrets lie underneath the layers of paint. For 5 long years, I played the part of a ghost in my own house. To the elite art circles of Manhattan, I was just a submissive, quiet 30-year-old art restorer, working out of a cold, dimly lit basement studio smelling of toxic turpentine and old canvases. I was married to Julian Vance, a ruthless hedge fund tycoon whose cruelty was as massive as his bank account. When we met, Julian was a broke, desperate broker on the verge of bankruptcy. I blindly loved him, investing my entire multi-million-dollar inheritance, left to me by my late grandfather, a legendary museum curator, to fund his very first investment firm. But the exact moment he became a billionaire, my paint-stained hands became his biggest source of social shame. He didn't want a partner, he wanted a trophy. One night, before a major corporate dinner, Julian looked at my stained apron with utter disgust and said, "Stay locked in the basement tonight, Iris. My elite clients don't need to know my wife looks like a museum servant." I lowered my eyes, nodding submissively like a broken housewife. But behind my quiet smile, I was holding back a dark, terrifying secret. I wasn't hurt by his words at all. Why? Because exactly 20 minutes before he walked down those stairs, I had uncovered something in his private study that proved my husband wasn't just a cruel man. He was a psychopath who was actively planning to have me erased forever. Julian believed I was weak, oblivious, and entirely dependent on his wealth. He completely forgot that an art restorer's eyes are mathematically trained to look past illusions and spot the most microscopic flaws. 3 days later, Julian left the mansion at dawn for what he claimed was an urgent weekend financial summit in London. The moment his luxury car cleared the security gates, my timid posture vanished. My spine straightened, and my eyes turned into pure ice. I walked directly up to his high-security private gallery room on the top floor. Julian had recently purchased a world-famous, $5 million Renaissance masterpiece called The Weeping Madonna, keeping it protected behind a heavy biometric glass frame. He constantly boasted to the media that this painting was his ultimate legacy. But as I shined my ultraviolet pocket torch across the centuries-old brushstrokes, my breathing stopped. The chemical composition of the top varnish was completely wrong. I carefully applied a specialized solvent to a microscopic corner of the canvas. Beneath the beautiful Renaissance oil paint, a modern laser-printed chemical stamp began to glow. It was a fake. A flawless criminal forgery. Julian hadn't bought a historical masterpiece. He was working with an international ring of art forgers. And hidden inside the hollow wooden backing of that very frame, I found a black encrypted ledger. As I cracked open that encrypted ledger under the dim light of his study, the true horror of my marriage was laid bare. Julian wasn't just laundering stolen money from his hedge fund through fake art. He was systematically blueprinting my absolute legal and financial execution. Over the past 12 months, Julian had used a brilliantly forged power of attorney document to secretly link my name, my identity, and my licensed art restoration studio to a massive, illegal $40 million offshore bank loan. According to his private handwritten notes, his timeline was chillingly precise. Within the next 2 weeks, Julian was going to file for a sudden, bitter divorce, claiming I was mentally unstable. He would intentionally crash our joint accounts, leaving the federal banks to trace the $40 million fraud directly to my basement studio. The authorities would arrest me for international grand larceny, sending me to a federal prison for life. Meanwhile, Julian would legally walk away into a sunset of billions, completely free to merge his empire with Victoria Sterling, the wealthy billionaire heiress who was his secret mistress. I stared at my forged signatures on the documents, my blood turning to liquid fire. "You want to play with illusions, Julian?" I whispered into the freezing, empty room. "I am going to paint your canvas of ruin." I didn't run to the police, and I didn't shed a single tear. I knew that Victoria's powerful family had the city's top judges and politicians inside their pockets. If I filed a regular report, the evidence would mysteriously vanish, and Julian's high-priced corporate defense lawyers would paint me as a delusional, bitter housewife trying to extort a successful billionaire. No, I didn't want a quiet legal battle. I wanted a public execution of his entire reputation. For the next 10 days, I played the role of the perfect, oblivious wife with absolute perfection. I adjusted his silk ties, cooked his favorite dinners, and even welcomed Victoria into our home with a polite, welcoming smile while she openly flirted with my husband right in front of my face. I let him believe he was an untouchable god. Then the perfect opportunity arrived. Julian and Victoria were organizing the event of the year, the luxury international art auction at the Grand Plaza Hotel. Julian was planning to sell the Weeping Madonna live on stage to a group of international foreign investors for $40 million, using that final cash out to trigger my arrest and flee the country. 2 days before the auction, Julian marched into my basement studio, tossing the heavy canvas onto my work table. "Make it shine, Iris," he sneered arrogantly. "This painting is my ticket to a new life. Don't ruin it with your clumsy hands." I forced a soft, gentle smile. "Don't worry, Julian. It will reveal its true value tonight." The second the basement door clicked shut, my hands moved with flawless mathematical precision. I didn't destroy the painting with a knife. Instead, I used my advanced chemical knowledge to formulate a highly specialized, time-sensitive chemical solvent. It was a unique heat-activated compound that remained completely transparent and invisible when cold. But the moment it was exposed to high-intensity, high-heat studio or stage spotlights for more than exactly 5 minutes, it would cause the modern, forged layers of oil paint to liquefy and dissolve rapidly. On the hidden, authentic bottom layer of the canvas, I used a permanent, specialized chemical ink to boldly write out his secret Swiss bank account numbers, his private offshore corporate shell names, and the giant words, "Forgery and Corporate Grand Larceny by Julian Vance." It was a chemical time bomb that Julian would willingly carry onto the stage with his own hands. I worked for 14 hours straight through the night, until the surface of the painting looked completely pristine and untampered with. The next morning, Julian took the canvas away, completely oblivious to the fact that he was holding his own digital death warrant. The trap was locked, and the stage was perfectly set. The night of the grand auction arrived, and the Grand Plaza Grand Ballroom was turned into a blinding sea of flashing media cameras, flowing champagne, and the city's most powerful elite. Julian stood dead center on the main stage, wearing a custom $10,000 tuxedo, his arm wrapped tightly around Victoria's waist. Victoria was beaming for the photographers, wearing a stunning diamond necklace purchased using the fraudulent funds tied to my identity. I was present at the gala too, but as always, I was completely invisible, sitting at the very back table near the kitchen staff, wearing a plain, cheap black dress. Julian hadn't even looked in my direction. At exactly 9 p.m., the main ballroom lights dimmed dramatically. A massive, high-powered halogen spotlight focused with intense heat directly on the Weeping Madonna, resting on the center stage. Julian stepped up to the microphone, his voice booming with absolute, intoxicating confidence. "Ladies and gentlemen, billionaires and visionaries." Julian spoke smoothly, flashing a multi-million-dollar smile at the national news cameras. "This painting represents pure, untouched history. Tonight, to celebrate our monumental new international merger, the bidding for this timeless masterpiece starts at $30 million. The crowd erupted into applause, and the bids started rising instantly. 35 million, 38 million. Julian was grinning with absolute triumph, looking at Victoria. He truly believed he had won the game. But right as the auctioneer raised his gavel to finalize the $40 million bid, a sudden, terrified whisper rippled through the front row of billionaires. The face of the Weeping Madonna, on the stage began to warp unnaturally. Under the intense, burning heat of the halogen spotlights, the chemical timer reached its limit. The beautiful oil paint began to melt, running down the canvas like liquid black wax. What is happening to the masterpiece? A major art critic screamed, standing up in horror. Julian froze, his confident smile instantly shattering as the microphone slipped slightly from his hand. He turned around to look at the canvas, his face turning pale as death. Within seconds, the top layer of fraudulent paint dissolved entirely, dripping onto the pristine stage floor in ugly, black puddles. In its place, the bright white hidden layer was exposed to the live television cameras. In giant, glowing chemical red letters, his private Swiss bank accounts, the routing numbers, the forged documents, and the words "forgery and global fraud by Julian Vance" appeared perfectly clear for the entire world to see. The journalists immediately broke past the security ropes, rushing forward as their camera flashes illuminated his sweating, terrified face in rapid succession. "This is a prank. Turn off the spotlights." Julian screamed in sheer panic, trying to cover the massive canvas with his tuxedo jacket. But the damage was entirely irreversible. Before he could step off the stage, the heavy double mahogany doors of the ballroom slammed open. 5 armed federal agents from the FBI's Financial and Art Crimes Division marched aggressively into the gala, their dark jackets sending a wave of absolute panic through the elite crowd. The lead investigator walked straight up the steps of the stage, bypassing the shouting journalists, and pulled out a pair of steel handcuffs. "Julian Vance," the agent announced coldly into the live microphone. "You are officially under arrest for multi-million-dollar international wire fraud, identity theft, grand larceny, and corporate embezzlement." Victoria gasped in pure horror, instantly backing away from him like he was a plague. "Julian, you disgusting snake. You used my family's corporate fund to launder stolen bank money?" she roared, stepping forward and slapping him across his face, so hard the sound cracked through the sound system. Julian was trembling violently, sweat completely soaking through his silk collar as the steel cuffs clicked tightly around his wrists. His image was permanently destroyed on national television. His eyes frantically scanned the crowd of 400 people, searching for a savior, until they locked onto the back corner of the room. Iris was standing there. I wasn't hiding in the shadows anymore. My shoulders were back, my head was held high, and my eyes were piercing directly into his soul. I slowly reached into the pocket of my black dress, pulled out a small glass bottle of the chemical solvent, and held it up high under the crystal chandeliers. In that horrific, final second, the veil completely fell from Julian's eyes. The entire puzzle clicked together in his mind. The basement studio, the pristine restoration, the perfect chemical timing. "You," Julian choked out, his cracking voice picked up by the microphone he was still clutching. "You painted this trap." I didn't say a single word to him. I simply opened my fingers and let the glass bottle drop onto the marble floor. The sharp, shattering crash echoed through the silent ballroom like the sound of a heavy federal prison cell door locking forever. The federal agents slammed him down, dragging him away as he screamed and cursed. The next morning, his billionaire lifestyle was entirely gone. His assets were frozen, his hedge fund collapsed, and the news reported he was facing a mandatory minimum sentence of 35 years in federal prison. Because I was the whistleblower who had securely delivered the encrypted ledger to the FBI weeks prior, all fraudulent debts were completely cleared from my name, and I was legally awarded his entire commercial real estate portfolio as compensation. I sat in my quiet studio, sipping tea, looking at a beautiful, completely blank canvas. Julian had spent 5 years trying to paint me into a tight corner, never realizing one simple truth of my trade. Never, under any circumstances, try to manipulate an artist who knows